So these are my latest bunch of hatchlings. They had some of the, they were some of the biggest eggs and some of the biggest babies that have ever hatched for me. Several of these snakes were over 100 grams when they hatched. And like, as you can see here, I marked them down after their first meals, 105 grams, 120 grams. That was 80 grams. He was the small one, like the runt, 115, and I didn't weigh these two because I'm keeping them both. I had a lot of questions last week after my video about, um, if your snake that's 2 years old is the same weight as my snake that's 4 months old, then there's a problem with that snake that the breeder didn't tell you about. So if you didn't check that video out, go check it out now. And also like and subscribe. Now, there was a lot of feedback on that video, probably the most comments that I've had on a video in a long time. And I want to follow up that video and talk about what are you supposed to do if you have a snake that is really small for its age. And there is such thing as having a snake that is too small for its age. And for instance, I think from the video last week, the commenter said, they had a snake that was like 2-3 years old and it was like 400 grams. I said, well, I have snakes that are 6 months old that are that size. I have snakes that are maybe my best growers are a little younger than that. And that's just feeding these snakes every single week. These babies here, let's take this guy for example, because he was one of the bigger ones. He popped out of the egg at 100 grams, but he took an adult mouse this week as his first meal. This runt here that came out, after he was probably 65, 70 grams when he hatched, he took close to an adult-sized mouse for his first meal. That's how I start off all of my babies. Ball pythons should not be eating pinky mice. They should never be eating pinky mice. Pinky mice are way too small for a hatchling ball python. Unless your ball python is extremely small runt, and it hatched out of its egg at 20 grams, the size of, like a baby sand boa, they should never be eating pinky mice unless you have to force feed at some point. Then you can get into some of the smaller prey items. But your baby ball pythons should never be eating pinky mice. I do see every once in a while that somebody's showing a video of a snake eating a pinky mouse. That's a ball python. That's too small for your snake. The reason my snakes grow at a consistent rate is because I'm feeding them the right size meal every week. Some people are asking me for how big of a meal, how many grams of a size rat do you feed a small ball python? At what size weight of a ball python do you start making a small rat a meal for that snake? I don't weigh any of that stuff out, to be honest. I never have. I've never taken a frozen rodent and figured out, this size gram rodent needs to go to this size ball python. And on top of that, when you get a small frozen thawed rat from Rodent Pro, from anywhere, there can be a 40-gram difference in that small rat, which can be pretty big depending on the size of your ball python. So there's no one size fits all answer for your snake. The thing that I always kind of approach it from is if you're trying to leave a lump in that snake's belly after it eats it. Doesn't need to be a big lump, but you want to see a lump. You don't want it to eat a meal and then not see that it ate a meal. That's the way I always sort of approach it. So you don't need to weigh your meals out, but it's not very hard to look at a rodent and look at your snake and say, well, this rodent is probably a little too small for a snake that's this thick. That's the rodent this big around, around its belly, is not going to leave a lump in the belly of a snake this big. If you have a snake this big, your rodent should probably be close to that size. Maybe not as big, but it should be close to that size around. That's going to leave a lump in your snake's belly. So if you get a snake that's 2 years old and extremely underweight, you cannot power feed. Please do not power feed your snakes. I have said this in every video that I've ever spoken about feeding your snakes in. And I say every single time, do not power feed your snakes. But I still have people saying that they want to power feed their snakes. I don't condone that. I do not power feed my snakes. And if you tell me you're power feeding your snakes in the comments, I'm going to probably rail on you. It's not okay to do. If you get a snake that's severely underweight because it was a picky eater and the breeder didn't tell you, or the breeder was maintenance feeding it, all you can do is start feeding it the appropriate size meals for its size. You can't make that snake catch up to the size that it should be at. You basically have to approach that snake like it's still that 400 gram snake. You can't make that 400 gram snake turn into a 1,000 gram snake overnight. And so these two are a good example. There's two snakes that I showed. And we got a fresh poop in here too, so I'll have to clean that up. But these two snakes that I showed in the last video are the perfect example. This girl over here was born in March last year. She was born in May, so there's about a 2-month difference. It might be a little less than that because she was born May 4th, and I think she was born mid-March. But there's a 2-month difference in age. But this snake is 1,600 grams, and this snake was 400 grams. There is no way in a healthy manner to have this snake catch up with this snake. This snake just happened to be a picky eater. She happened to go off of food for a long period of time. This snake eats food whether she's in shed or whether she's not in shed. She eats every single week, week in and week out. So this snake that's a little over a year old is already basically at adult size, at breeding size, because she's a great eater. She's not overweight. She's not fat. She's extremely feisty. That's not a fat snake. She is not obese. She's not overweight. She's just growing at an alarming rate because she never skips a meal. I can't make this snake that's half the size take meals that it doesn't want to take. She's still a healthy size as well. She's still a very beautiful snake. She's still at a decent size. She's just not growing as fast as she's growing because she doesn't like to eat all the time. There's nothing I can do about that. That's just the way she chose to eat her meals every week. So you can't force this snake to catch up to the other snake in a healthy way. That would require you to power feed your snakes, which is an unnatural, unhealthy way to have your snakes gain weight. That means you're feeding it a meal that's way too big. That means you're feeding it meals too often, and that's not safe for those snakes. They can get obese, they can get overweight, and it's not healthy for them the same way that it's not healthy for humans. So please do not power feed your snakes. It's not healthy for them. If your snake is severely underweight and undersized for its age, all you can do is start trying to feed it in a healthy way. Start trying to feed it the appropriately sized meals. You can't undo what the previous owner of that snake did. You can't change the fact that maybe it wasn't the owner, maybe it was just the snake was picky. You can't change any of that. All you can do is start doing it the right way from this point forward. So if you have a 3-year-old snake that's 400 grams, you can't just assume to yourself, well, it's ready to breed if it puts on weight, because that's not necessarily the case either. Just because it's 3 years old doesn't mean it's ready to breed, because it's just a little too small. That snake needs to be the right size to breed and the right age to breed. So, and I would assume that even with ball pythons, it's probably more to do with it being a healthy size than it is to do with age necessarily. So, you know, it's a topic that people don't really have a lot of discussion about. Believe me, I've been doing this since 2019, basically full time at this point. And I mean, I've sold 250 plus snakes on Morph Market, and I've bought, I would say, over 100 snakes off of Morph Market, and I've shopped for and looked at thousands of snakes on Morph Market. And I can tell you from my own experience that when you're buying hatchlings usually, or even snakes that are a year old or 2 years old, things that aren't proven breeders already, there's a lot of snakes that are either picky eaters or maintenance fed, or just frankly not giving a shit about in their racks. They're way too small for their age. I've purchased one or two from big breeders that, the weights weren't updated. When I bought them, they were a few months old to a year old, where I've been like, shit, I got the snake here, and I was like, wow, that's not really small for its age. Luckily, the snake was healthy. It started eating from me right away, and it got to the size it needed to be. But when I went to go buy big groups of snakes and asked about them and asked for their current weights on everything, there's been big groups of snakes that I've purchased, and I've excluded 2, 3, 4, or 5 snakes from that group that I wanted to purchase that I didn't, because I looked at their age and I looked at their weight. It was 2 years old and it was still 200 or 300 grams. And I was like, do not want that. That is not something I want to deal with. I don't know what the issue is there, but there's no way that whatever's going on with it is a problem that I want to deal with. So you need to pay attention to that sort of stuff. These videos, I try to cover, like this video specifically, and the one I did last week about the 2-year-old versus the 4-month-old snake. I try to cover as much as I can in the videos. If there's still more you don't understand, let me know down below. If you don't get it, try to watch it again, because it's a lot of stuff to process. And it's easy for me to say this stuff because I've been doing it for a long time and I understand it. I understand it and I'm talking about it. And the problem is a lot of people aren't talking about this stuff, and there's a lot of bigger breeders that don't maybe necessarily want people to talk about it. I'm not trying to be a freaking whistleblower or anything, but it's one of those things where I'm an advocate for buyers and sellers, because I'm both. I still buy snakes and I obviously sell snakes, and I'm trying to pass on the knowledge I have from both ends of it. And I also don't want to see, I'm not okay with the big breeders that are so big that they can't take care of all the snakes they have. Obviously, if you're having to cut costs by feed everything smaller meals or not feed snakes as often as they should be fed, then maybe you're too big. And that's an issue with probably a lot of companies. And I don't like seeing that. Sometimes buyers aren't as educated as they should be. And sometimes that's a big negative for the buyer. And sometimes it makes it harder for the seller as well. Believe me, there's been a lot of times where I've dealt with customers and I've been like, WTF, what, I don't even know if I want to deal with this person. You can, as a buyer, you can choose who you're selling to. I actually canceled a sale a few months ago. Somebody bought a snake, paid for it in full, and then the day that I was trying to ship the morning of the day that I was going to ship it to him, he was asking me how to set up the terrarium. And I said, bro, I was like, I can't ship the snake to you. You obviously were not prepared for this. I said, I'll give you all the details about how to set this up. Please get it set up. Please test it out for a few days. We'll ship next week. So I think this was on Wednesday night or Thursday or something, Wednesday night. And he started getting upset, saying I was kind of treating him like a little kid. And I said, look, I'm not shipping it to you today. I said, so you can either get this set up, verify that everything's working properly, or I can just give you a refund. And he wanted the refund, which I was fine with, because I honestly didn't want to sell him a snake at that point, because I knew there was not going to be a positive interaction between the buyer and seller at that point or moving forward. Unfortunately, I still haven't sold that snake. So, it kind of it kind of bit me in the butt a little bit, because he basically paid full price for it. It's this guy here, so he's still here. He's still getting fed and growing, and really awesome looking double het DG pied. So that kind of bit me in the butt. But it's there. There's bad customers and there's bad sellers. So the information, with this channel, I'm trying to just put all of the information out there. I'm trying to put accurate information out there. I'm trying to kind of, I don't want to sound freaking dramatic, but I'm trying to kind of pull the veil back on some of the BS practices that have been around in this hobby for a while, because I think the more transparent things become, the more trust you build with your customer base. And that's kind of what everything I do. When I list a snake, I list its birth date, I list its weight, I list accurate photos. If the snake is a picky eater, I do say that just so they know. I say if it's an adult, I say what they're eating. I say what their clutch size is. If they had a clutch, I say when it was laid. I put all that information out there because an informed buyer is gonna be a happy buyer. If they choose to buy that snake off you with all this information up front, then there's nothing, there can't be buyer's remorse from the client business side of things, because I told them everything up front. If you're hiding stuff like that when you're selling a snake and you're not presenting all that information up front, it's probably because you're trying to hide something, or you're just freaking lazy. And there's a lot of that going around too. So, inform yourself, watch these videos, really pull as much information as you can out of them. There are a lot of fantastic breeders out there, and even the big breeders that do make mistakes, it's not like they're bad people or bad breeders. It could just be that there's too much going on and they can't take care of everything as well as they should be, or keep an eye on things as well as they should be. So, to bring things around full circle again, if you're still watching this late in the video of my rant, if your snake is undersized for its age, do not power feed it. The only thing you can do is start feeding it the appropriately sized meals. And that meal should be roughly the size of the biggest part of the snake's belly, so that it leaves a little lump inside of that snake. I cannot tell you ratios. People try to go by the rodent should be 10% of the body's weight thing. I do not weigh my rodents. I have no idea what they weigh when they go in there. I can eyeball a snake and guess what their weight is because I do weigh my snakes. I know what they weigh. I can tell what their growth rates are. I could not eyeball a rodent for you and tell you what the rodent weighed because I literally never weigh them. So please don't ask me that question. I couldn't tell you. And on top of that, if you want to ask, well, should a 500-gram ball python take a small rat? Should a 1,000-gram ball python take a medium rat? I can't answer that for you anyways, because when you go to buy a frozen rodent that's a small or a medium, it's not like it's a certain size. There can be a 40-gram or 100-gram difference between both ends of what's considered a medium or a small. And 100 grams is pretty big of a size difference from one end to the other. I used to buy more frozen rodents and from specific online retailers, and I actually stopped buying rodents from them because the mediums that I was buying at one point were fantastic sized. They were good meals for all my adults, and then within one or two more purchases from them, because I'd buy in bulk, the mediums shrunk significantly in size, and they were starting to be on the lower end of what that 100-gram range was or whatever it was. So I stopped buying from them. But that's a big difference because when they were bigger mediums, they were leaving lumps in the snakes, and when they were smaller mediums, they were not leaving lumps in the snakes. So you can't just say, I'm going to buy mediums or smalls or whatever for my snakes, and that's going to get the job done. The rodent needs to leave a lump in the snake's belly. That rodent's going to be roughly about the same width as your snake. If your snake's this big, the rodent's probably going to be around the same size too. you'll see, if you see a lump in the snake's belly, as it's kind of moving down its digestive system, you'll see that lump is there. So this is going to be a long Monday video. Hopefully we're back to snakes tomorrow. I actually got some good questions or video ideas over the weekend. So, please leave comments below if there's certain stuff you want me to talk more about, or certain things you want to see, more projects you want to see. I can cover all of that because, like I said, I'm making 5 videos a week now. I'm planning on doing that permanently. And, there's going to be days where I'm just showing you stuff in the rack. There's going to be days where I'm showing you new snakes. But this is going to be really user-driven content. So if there's stuff you want to see, please let me know.